Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to imagine, if you will, a delicate balance scale. On one side, your hard-earned income, a substantial, comforting weight. On the other, his lighter, yet equally important contributions. Now, imagine a hand reaching for the lighter side, not to add more, but to adjust the fulcrum, demanding an equal sway over both sides. That's where you find yourself. Your boyfriend makes less, sometimes significantly less, but he wants an equal say in financial decisions. And you're left with the quiet question in your mind, is that unfair? You remember that gnawing thought, don't you? That subtle unease. Because deep down, you knew it wasn't just about the money. Not truly. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I'm doing here. Tell me, where are you tuning in from tonight? What time is it for you right now? Now? Turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise. And let's get started tonight. The quiet hum of your daily life together had always felt harmonious, a gentle blending of two distinct melodies. You loved him deeply, and his presence brought a warmth and comfort you cherished. The initial conversations about money had been light, almost abstract. When you first moved in, you both contributed what you could, a simple arrangement that felt right. Your career had blossomed, a steady climb that rewarded your dedication and hard work with a comfortable income. His path, while equally earnest, had been slower, less lucrative, leaving a tangible difference in your monthly earnings. At first, it wasn't an issue. You covered more, naturally, because you had more. It felt like a simple act of love, a testament to your commitment. You thought about the historical concept of coverture in many societies, where a woman's legal identity, and thus her property, would be absorbed by her husband upon marriage. While a relic of the past, the echoes of financial control and power dynamics tied to gender roles still subtly resonate in modern relationships. In a curious reversal, you, as the higher earner, now felt a similar, though unstated, pressure on your financial autonomy, not from legal bindings, but from the emotional landscape of your partnership. The idea of his equal say, despite unequal contribution, felt like a modern reinterpretation of an ancient challenge to individual financial agency. He had a quirky habit that, in the early days, you found rather charming. Whenever you discussed a larger purchase for the apartment, a new sofa, a television, even a weekend trip, he would enthusiastically research every option, meticulously comparing prices and features, despite knowing you would be covering the bulk, if not all, of the cost. He'd present his findings with the earnestness of a seasoned financial advisor, completely absorbed in the details. It was endearing, a sign of his engagement. But as the financial disparity widened, this meticulous research began to feel less like shared enthusiasm and more like an exercise in theoretical spending, disconnected from the reality of who was actually footing the bill. Dr. Gail Kinsey Gorman, a psychotherapist and financial expert, often discusses the concept of financial empathy in relationships. She argues that true partnership requires both individuals to understand and respect each other's financial realities, including income disparities, and to make decisions that reflect this mutual understanding. When one partner, despite earning less, demands equal say without equal contribution, it can reveal a lack of financial empathy, leading to resentment in the higher-earning partner. You felt this truth resonate deeply within you. It wasn't about control. It was about acknowledging the different financial positions and the effort behind each dollar. You found yourself holding back a little, mentally hedging your bets before mentioning potential expenses. The once effortless flow of conversation around future plans, holidays, or even a new appliance now came with an unspoken internal calculation. How much would this cost? How much would he contribute? How much would I end up paying? The natural spontaneity began to wither under the weight of these quiet considerations. And with each thought, a small, subtle knot of unfairness tightened in your stomach. There were 13 moments, clear as crystal, when the imbalance truly pricked at your consciousness. The time he suggested a luxurious weekend getaway, casually mentioning how great it would be, without a whisper about how to fund it. The instance he confidently stated his preference for a more expensive brand of coffee, knowing full well you were the one buying groceries. Each small assertion of preference, unmoored from financial reality, felt like a tiny chisel chipping away at your sense of fairness, leaving behind a subtle yet persistent unease. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, a constant companion in your shared living space, now seemed to punctuate the growing silence between you on certain topics. My boyfriend makes less, but wants equal say in financial decisions. Unfair? The question, once a quiet thought, began to echo with a persistent resonance, touching every corner of your daily interactions. His desires, expressed with a charming certainty, now felt like a heavy weight, pushing against the delicate balance you tried to maintain. You found yourself mentally preparing for conversations, anticipating requests that would inevitably fall on your shoulders, and a subtle shift began to occur in the very way you viewed your shared future. You considered the historical concept of communal property in various societies, from early agricultural communities to certain indigenous tribes, where resources were often held and managed collectively. While romantic in theory, even these systems relied on a shared understanding of contribution and need. Your current reality, however, felt like a modern twist on this ancient idea, where the communal aspect seemed to apply more to the spending than to the earning, creating a subtle yet significant asymmetry in the decision-making process. The idea of equal say, when contribution was so unequal, felt like a deliberate overlooking of the fundamental principles of fairness embedded in even the most communal historical practices. He had a particularly innocent, almost oblivious quirk that now struck you with a quiet force. Whenever you'd present a budget or gently suggest a more frugal option for something you both wanted, he would furrow his brow, genuinely considering your point, but then almost immediately pivot to a more expensive, often aspirational, alternative. But wouldn't it be so much nicer if we just got the premium version? He'd muse, his eyes bright with possibility. It was as if his mind simply skipped over the constraints of reality, always aiming for the ideal, regardless of the financial implications you were acutely aware of. This boundless optimism, while sweet, began to feel like a quiet burden, demanding a constant practical counterargument from you. Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist, extensively researches money scripts, Unconscious beliefs about money formed in childhood that influence adult financial behavior. He often points out that individuals can have conflicting money scripts, such as money is power or money is love. In your situation, his desire for equal say, despite lower income, could stem from a script equating financial participation with equal power or equal love, regardless of earned contribution. This clashed with your potential script, which might link financial contribution more directly to decision-making authority or a sense of equitable partnership. The tension, therefore, wasn't just about the numbers, but about these deeply ingrained, often invisible psychological frameworks. You found yourself holding back, not just financially, but emotionally. The openness you once shared, the carefree discussion of dreams and desires, became subtly filtered through a pragmatic lens. You imagined a quiet sigh escaping your lips every time he suggested something grand, something that you knew instinctively would be primarily your financial responsibility. And with each imagined sigh, a tiny crack, almost imperceptible, appeared in the seamless surface of your intimacy. There were 13 times you thought about having a frank conversation, the words forming on your tongue like carefully selected stones, ready to be placed on the scales. The time he suggested a significantly more expensive apartment than you could comfortably afford on your own. The time he dismissed your concerns about saving for a future goal, insisting it would all work out. Each instance, each casual dismissal of your financial realities tightened the knot of frustration in your gut. Yet the words remained unspoken, trapped by a fear of hurting him, of disrupting the fragile peace that often masked the deeper imbalance. Section 3. The very air in your apartment, once filled with effortless understanding, now felt subtly charged, almost electric, with the weight of unspoken financial dynamics. My boyfriend makes less, but wants equal say in financial decisions. Unfair? The question had ceased to be an internal query. It was now a silent, persistent hum, influencing your every interaction, every shared glance. You began to notice a subtle shift in the unspoken hierarchy, a quiet power struggle emerging around financial choices, despite your undeniable role as the primary earner. It was as if his desire for equal say, without the equal financial input, was slowly, imperceptibly, attempting to tilt the scales of control. You recalled the feudal systems of medieval Europe, where land, the primary source of wealth and power, was held by lords, and peasants worked the land in exchange for protection and a share of the harvest. While the peasants had a vital role in generating wealth, ultimate control rested with the lord. In a strange, modern inversion, you, as the higher earner, felt a parallel to the lord, providing the land, the bulk of the financial resources. Yet your peasant, your boyfriend in this distant metaphor, sought an equal say in how the harvest was distributed and managed, despite his smaller direct contribution to its abundance. It highlighted how deeply ingrained the concept of control tied to contribution has been throughout history. He had a particularly innocent, almost endearing, yet increasingly frustrating habit. Whenever you'd make a significant financial decision on your own, perhaps investing in a new appliance you'd researched and funded, or making a down payment on something substantial, he would offer lavish praise, almost as if he were observing a fascinating yet separate process. "You're so smart with money," he'd exclaim, or "I'm so glad I have you for this." While the compliments were genuinely given, they also served as a subtle distancing, an unspoken declaration that this was your domain, your responsibility, even as he simultaneously sought equal decision-making power over the outcomes. This passive admiration, devoid of active participation, began to feel like a quiet weight, adding to the growing sense of unfairness. Dr. Vicky Bogan, a professor of financial psychology, often emphasizes the concept of financial self-efficacy, an individual's belief in their own ability to effectively manage financial tasks. When there's a significant income disparity, the higher earner might develop a strong sense of financial self-efficacy, while the lower earner might experience a diminished sense, leading them to defer to the higher earner's decisions, or conversely, to overcompensate by demanding an equal say without fully grasping the implications. His insistence on equal say, despite less direct financial contribution, could be a subconscious attempt to bolster his own financial self-efficacy, to feel equally capable and in control, even if the underlying financial reality remained uneven. The tension, therefore, was not merely about money, but about the unspoken psychological needs each of you brought to the financial table. You found yourself becoming more guarded, less inclined to spontaneously share your financial thoughts or plans. The ease with which you once discussed future investments or large purchases had evaporated, replaced by a subtle apprehension. You imagined the inevitable pushback, the gentle insistence on his preferred, often more expensive option. The 13 instances you'd almost brought up the discrepancy, the words forming like carefully balanced pebbles on your tongue, only to fall back into the silent well of your thoughts, now felt like silent warnings. Each unsaid word deepened the chasm, making the eventual conversation seem like scaling an increasingly sheer cliff face. The intimacy between you, once a seamless flow of connection, began to feel subtly fractured by this unspoken tension. You heard a zipper. Then everything went silent, except for the sound of a heart screaming. The physical closeness, while still present, felt tinged with an awareness of the unaddressed financial disparity, a faint barrier that subtly muted the vibrancy of your connection. It was as if the ledger of your earnings, meticulously kept in your mind, had somehow permeated the very essence of your shared space, casting a long, quiet shadow over even your most intimate moments. The internal debate had escalated, no longer a quiet whisper, but a persistent, almost audible hum in your ears. My boyfriend makes less, but wants equal say in financial decisions. Unfair? The question gnawed at you, consuming your thoughts, coloring your perception of every shared moment. You felt a deep sense of unease, a burgeoning resentment that coiled in your stomach each time a new financial discussion arose. You began to question the very foundation of fairness within your partnership, grappling with what it truly meant to be equitable when your contributions were so vastly different. You considered the historical concept of separate economies within a household, where, in some cultures, husbands and wives manage their own incomes and expenses, contributing to the household as agreed, but maintaining individual financial autonomy. This distinct separation, while far removed from your modern commingled finances, highlighted an alternative approach to managing financial disparities. It made you wonder if a clearer demarcation of financial responsibilities, rather than a blurring of lines, might offer a path towards greater fairness and less internal conflict in your own situation. It was a stark reminder that shared lives didn't always necessitate perfectly merged financial identities. He had a subtle, yet infuriating, quirky habit during financial discussions. He would often nod thoughtfully, listening intently to your points about budgeting or the cost implications of a decision. But then, his eyes would subtly glaze over, a faraway look replacing his engagement. It was as if your words, while heard, simply didn't penetrate the comfortable, optimistic bubble of his financial perspective. This passive absorption, this subtle mental disengagement, felt like a deliberate act of unburdening himself from the weight of financial reality, leaving you to carry it alone, even as he demanded equal control. Dr. Olivia Mellon, a financial therapist, often discusses the concept of money personality types and how clashes between them can create significant relationship stress. She identifies types like savers, spenders, and money avoiders. Your internal conflict and his insistence on equal say, despite less contribution, could be a manifestation of clashing money personalities. Perhaps you are a saver or a money-conscious type, while he leans towards spender or even money avoider. This fundamental difference in approach, when unacknowledged and unaddressed, leads to deep-seated frustration and the feeling that you are constantly pulling against an invisible tide. The silent tension, therefore, was not merely about income, but about fundamentally different ways of relating to money itself. You found yourself withdrawing into a shell of financial solitude. The spontaneous joy of planning a future together, of dreaming big dreams, began to feel tainted by the unspoken financial reality. You imagined the 13 times you'd almost broken, the words of exasperation clawing at your throat. This isn't fair. I earned the money. Why do you get to decide how we spend it? Each unspoken word was a stone added to the wall between you, making the divide feel insurmountable. The resentment, once a tiny seed, had begun to sprout, its tendrils wrapping around your sense of generosity, choking the pure affection you held for him. The casual suggestions he made, the easy dismissal of your concerns, felt like tiny cuts, slowly eroding your patience. You started to notice how often he would say, "we should," or "we could," always implying a shared action, yet never specifying how his contribution would manifest. The unspoken expectation was clear. Your higher income would simply absorb the costs. This unspoken contract, unagreed upon and unacknowledged, began to feel like a heavy chain, binding your financial freedom to his unchecked desires, all under the guise of equal say. The quiet hum of the air conditioner, a constant companion in your shared space, felt like a drone mirroring the relentless internal monologue. My boyfriend makes less but wants equal say in financial decisions. Unfair? The question was no longer a query. It was a deep, guttural feeling, a profound sense of imbalance that pervaded your every thought about the relationship. You began to dissect not just his behavior, but your own deeply ingrained beliefs about money, love, and partnership. The discomfort wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the fundamental clash of values, the silent battle over how a shared life should truly be managed when incomes diverge. You reflected on the concept of dowry and bride price in various historical and cultural contexts, where wealth was exchanged between families as part of a marriage agreement. These were often explicit financial contracts, defining expectations and contributions. Your modern relationship, while free from such formal arrangements, felt like it was operating under an implicit, unwritten contract, one where your higher earning implicitly granted you the role of primary provider, yet he still expected equal decision-making power. The historical precedents, however rigid, at least offered clarity. Your situation felt shrouded in an unspoken ambiguity that was becoming increasingly suffocating. He had a particularly innocent, almost oblivious, quirky habit. Whenever you mentioned a significant purchase you were considering, especially for yourself, he would instantly become an enthusiastic advocate for a more luxurious, often unnecessary, upgrade. But darling, if you're getting a new laptop, you simply must get the top-tier model with the extra features, he'd declare, his eyes sparkling with vicarious excitement. It was as if your money, the fruit of your labor, was simply an abstract concept to him, readily available for enhancement and upgrades, without any sense of its hard-won nature. This unchecked enthusiasm for spending your money felt like a subtle, yet profound disrespect for the effort behind it. Dr. Shirley Glass, known for her work on infidelity and trust, also explored the importance of financial transparency and trust in relationships. She argued that withholding information or having different, unexpressed expectations about money can be as damaging as other forms of relational betrayal. His insistence on equal say, coupled with a lack of understanding or respect for your financial contributions, felt like a subtle breach of trust, a quiet undermining of the implicit agreement that partnership involves mutual responsibility. The silence around your true feelings on the matter, therefore, contributed to a growing distance, a widening chasm where trust should have flourished. The 13 times you had imagined confronting him, the words burning on your tongue, only to be swallowed back down, left a bitter taste. Each instance reinforced the uncomfortable truth. You were protecting his feelings at the expense of your own sense of fairness and well-being. The fear of his reaction, of appearing unloving or petty, felt like a heavy cloak, stifling your voice. You began to feel a deep, pervasive weariness, a fatigue that went beyond mere tiredness. It was an emotional exhaustion born from constantly navigating this unspoken, unfair dynamic, from silently carrying the weight of both the financial burden and the emotional labor of managing his expectations. You started to notice patterns in his casual financial comments, a dismissive wave of the hand when discussing the cost of living, a quiet suggestion to just put it on the credit card without acknowledging whose credit card it would be. These small, seemingly innocuous actions began to feel like a deliberate avoidance of financial reality, an unconscious abdication of responsibility. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage where you performed the role of sole provider, while he played the role of enthusiastic yet unburdened equal partner, always wanting to direct the show without contributing to the budget. The internal storm had reached its peak, a cacophony of questions and frustrations that could no longer be contained. My boyfriend makes less, but wants equal say in financial decisions. Unfair? The answer, in your heart, was a resounding, painful yes. The quiet erosion of your generosity, the subtle shifts in control, and the pervasive sense of unfairness had led you to a precipice. You knew, with chilling clarity, that this unspoken dynamic could not continue. The need for an honest, perhaps painful confrontation had become an undeniable imperative. You thought of the historical community chests, or tithing practices found in various religious and communal societies, where individuals contributed a portion of their earnings to a shared fund, which was then managed collectively for the benefit of all. While the contributions were often proportional to one's means, the decision-making was communal. Your situation, however, felt like a distortion of this, where your contribution was disproportionately large, yet his say was expected to be equally weighted. This imbalance in contribution versus decision-making power was the core of your internal conflict. A fundamental deviation from any historical model of fair collective resource management. He had one last, deeply ingrained, quirky habit that solidified your resolve. Whenever you would quietly, almost imperceptibly, take care of a shared household expense, restocking the pantry, paying a utility bill, he would rarely offer a direct thank you for the financial contribution itself. Instead, he would offer a general appreciation for the outcome. "Oh, good, we have coffee again," or "glad the electricity's on." This consistent omission of thanks for the actual financial effort, this quiet acknowledgement of the convenience without recognition of the cost, felt like a profound erasure of your contribution, making his demand for equal say feel even more audacious. Dr. John Gottman, whose extensive research on couples provides profound insights, emphasizes the concept of repair attempts in relationships. He argues that healthy couples learn to address conflict directly and to make bids for connection even during difficult conversations. Your unspoken resentment, the avoidance of this crucial topic, had prevented any repair attempts from taking place, allowing the wound to fester. His demand for equal say, without acknowledging the disparity in contribution, became a catalyst, forcing you to consider making your own repair attempt, a direct, vulnerable conversation to reestablish a foundation of fairness and mutual respect. The silence, therefore, had become a destructive force, preventing true relational healing. The 13 times you had considered leaving, each instance a painful internal struggle, now felt like a desperate plea from your own spirit for a more equitable existence. You realized that your silence, while intended to preserve peace, had instead cultivated a quiet bitterness that threatened to consume the love you felt. The fear of his reaction, of him feeling hurt or diminished, still lingered, but it was now dwarfed by the profound exhaustion of maintaining this unsustainable charade. You looked at him across the room, engrossed in something on his phone, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing within you. A wave of both frustration and a profound sense of sadness washed over you. This wasn't about punishing him or about flaunting your higher income. It was about defining what a true partnership meant to you. A mutual understanding of effort, a shared responsibility, and a decision-making process that respected the realities of both contributions. The conversation would be difficult, the air thick with unspoken expectations and potential hurt. But the alternative, a life lived with this constant, quiet ache of unfairness, was no longer an option. The rhythmic sound of your own breathing in the quiet room felt like a steady drumbeat, urging you forward towards the necessary, terrifying, and ultimately liberating truth. The gentle hum of the fan in the quiet darkness, the soft echoes of your own thoughts. Remember that initial image, the delicate balance scale, its equilibrium subtly skewed. The intricate dance of love and money is rarely simple, rarely perfectly balanced. It is a nuanced negotiation, a continuous conversation that asks for courage, vulnerability, and a profound respect for each other's realities. The question of fairness in a relationship with differing incomes is not about assigning blame or demanding precise equality, but about fostering transparency, acknowledging contributions, both seen and unseen, and building a shared future that feels equitable to both hearts. May you find the strength to navigate these tender waters, to speak your truth with compassion, and to forge a partnership where every voice, every contribution is truly valued and understood. End of script. Leave a comment to let me know what you think.